I want to talk here about how these colonial and revolutionary era writers were reading used figurative language to create an aspirational identity for America. An America that maybe didn't even really exist yet, but was an America that these writers and thinkers wanted to see emerge. As we do that, it's important to think about the relationship between connotation and literary devices. Connotation means all of the associations and beyond literal meanings that we can connect to a word. And in a way, all literary devices rely on connotation. So we can almost say any literary device connotes. So a metaphor is a vehicle that connotes something about a tenor, right? A comparison with a vehicle and a tenor where the vehicle connotes something about the tenor. A metonym is something closely associated with something that is used to replace that thing, and by so doing establishes associations and transliteral, beyond literal meanings. Symbols obviously are things that represent more than themselves, and images provoke feelings, reactions, ideas, associations. Images operate on connotation. So connotation is sort of the meta idea that encompasses all the different kind of literary devices we're going to be looking at. If you look at Crevecoeur, we see in his work early on a paragraph about immigrants as plants. Plants that, while living in the horror of European society, wither, but when they come to America and the new world and the new society here, flourish. And this is all part of Crevecoeur's fantasy of an America of yeoman farmers, people who are able to make their living independently as farm owners. And this was never the reality in America for most Americans. It was always an aspiration, but it was certainly closer to the reality in this colonial and early New Republican era when whites were expanding across the country. And this became seen as a form of planting, a form of transplanting from Europe to America. And Crevecoeur plays with this organic, self-justifying image of the plant and the migrant immigrant as a plant who thrives through transplantation. John Dickinson, in his song, almost in a shocking manner to us, right, invokes the idea of the colonists as slaves, which of course they are not literally slaves, but he's arguing they're made slaves by taxation without representation. Now the horrifying irony here is it's the colonists who are the slavers. It's the colonists who own the slaves and are dependent on an increasingly growing southern plantation slave chattel slavery system, which of course becomes a major irony during the Revolutionary War and something that haunts the founders through the entire constitutional era and ultimately isn't resolved till the Civil War. Hannah Griffiths uses a metaphor of American men as pensioners, renters, lodgers in a house who depend on the succor, the support, the aid of their landowner and can't risk offending that landowner, comparing them to American men afraid to challenge the British. And so that move, that comparison, evokes connotations of dependency, and she's challenging that. And then you have Thomas Paine in this famous passage where he talks about freedom as a refugee, freedom personified as a fugitive that is running from the old world, Europe, running from Africa, running from Asia to America, to a promised land where it can thrive. And then finally, even John Adams, in a conversation with his wife Abigail, after she's reminded him to remember the ladies and not give men legal power to tyrannize over women, he jokingly responds with this metaphor of the despotism of the petticoat. And the petticoat are the underskirts that colonial women wore under their dresses. And this kind of joke is has a long history in the battle for female equality. Men frequently joke that women frequently joked over the process of the historical drive for equality that women already had tremendous power, that men needed the legal and public power to sort of protect themselves, kind of in a facetious manner. But what we really get at here is the idea, this anxiety, right? This threat that if women are given sort of any legal or political equality, they will take over, and that men will lose their power and standing in a patriarchal world. And so for all his joking, Adams invokes a metonym here, the petticoat being something closely related to women that becomes a symbolic representation of women themselves. And that's what a metonym is. So I'm sorry I was talking fast and racing through that. Hope the captions help. See you in Blackboard.